backwards, but I see.
Sorry about that.
I wasn't quite ready anyway.
Yeah.
My great granddad and my granddad, not related, one was the father-in-law of the other, were both farmers. One came from a family farm that was owned in Hazelhurst, and the other was a tenant farmer in Broxton, which was about 40 miles south, right in the middle of middle Georgia. So the land there, if you've been up, is slightly graded, not up and down, but it's got rich soils that go between streams. As they call them up there, they're called branches. When they say, I'm going to go down to the branch. My great Aunt Bessie was the first of 9 children. She was born in 1903. My grandmother not until 1907. But Bessie never left home because she stayed and took care of her parents as they aged. And my grandfather, who was a farmer, passed away from leukemia. And in that year, 1937, there were very few treatments for it other than transfusions. So my grandmother became a widow with my mom as her child. And long story short, my mom had a unit of family around her that included her grandfather and grandmother, my, of course, grandmother, and that was her, and my great Aunt Bess. Great Aunt Bessie used to tell me about farming with her dad, but what I came today to try to focus on was my granddad looked a certain way for church, and then he looked a different way for farming. So when he was at church, I saw a picture of him forever. And then I saw a picture of him in the farm, and I asked my grandmother, I was about y'all's age, I said, who is this guy with glasses on and all wrapped up in handkerchiefs and a big hat on? She said, that's your granddad. And I couldn't believe it because all I had ever seen was the Sunday go to church picture where he was dressed up and his hair was combed and he wasn't wearing his glasses. I asked my grandma, I said, what about the change? And she said, well, he did dress up pretty nice for Sunday school. And she got up with him because she said he was kind. So I'm going to try to channel the ideas and the thoughts and tie it into growing sunflowers for the time. So when my granddad would farm, he would wear a shirt, believe it or not, that was a lot like this. And he would even pull the collar up, not only to keep his neck from burning on the back, but then he would put on a tall hat with a wide brim, cover his ears. And then these are the pictures that I saw from farming. He looked like a bandit. He had another hat that he would wear though, and in that time period, he had to dress like this to both be cool. He had to wear an undershirt to keep the sweat from coming through his outer shirt, and all of the material was all cotton, kind of an open, inexpensive weave like hemp cloth, and it would breathe. So if he sweated, you could stand in the breeze, but in Broxton, Georgia, not always did it breeze. You know, so you probably had to go down to the creek or to the branch. And I would literally, Bess would say they would go down and stick their feet in the stream, put their hands in, take a bucket of water, pour it over their heads and put their hats back on with this wet on top of it to cool their bodies down. And you know why they wore long sleeve shirts? And then we'll talk about sunflowers. They never did farm them here, but they should have. Long sleeve shirts were for 2 reasons. It kept the sun off of your skin, because the quickest way to heat up is to go out and open your arms to the radiation of the sun, and it heats you up. But in addition to that, think about all the things that you're going to go through on a farm that are going to cut your arms. Corn. Have you ever rolled around in St. Augustine grass and been like, woo, that itches? Corn is even worse. If you walk through a cornfield without long sleeve, it's going to cut every time you go by. It's a huge grass is what it is. Tobacco is worse because tobacco has a horned worm on it with a stinger on the tip. So the fact that nobody picks tobacco anymore is probably a good thing, but that would protect you from that. And also cotton. Cotton has very hard bolls. If you go to pick cotton, you have to wear gloves, and the fiber will get into your arms and their tiny little hairs. But enough about farming in the 30s. I think at the time, Georgia was failing with their farms because they had peaked by cotton production. So they had overproduced. Not always were they good farmers. They were pushing to grow more and more and more cotton. When the Depression hit, the bottom fell out, and then World War II came. And all the cotton production went to make like bags for the war. So cotton fell out. So smart farmers at the time took the option to plant pine trees. I wish that we had had options to plant sunflowers in the South. A lot of times they would plant other items, but for the most part, this took off in the Midwest. After World War II, the production quadrupled of this for oil. Fascinating things about sunflowers. You think it's one flower, right? You know how many flowers are on this? Take a guess. How about how many? How about 1,000? One. Tell you what, let me pass out. I've got some pass outs. Did they go out to the kids? I'm not sure if Gene. There you go. Take a look at the structure of this flower, y'all. And I'm going to show you something fascinating. When you look at a sunflower, you think that you're looking at one flower. These are modified bracts. All this is for is to attract the insect to it. Why? To pollinate. Flies around, and you know what? That insect will touch 500 flowers. And what happens when you pollinate a flower? It does. She had a really good point, guys. When a bee flies along here, lands on this in a field, how many flowers he touches is just about how many he pollinates. And they're so close here that they can pollinate in the wind. They don't even have to. And another fascinating fact is they have both male and female parts in their flower. So they have everything they need within one house to make a seed. So what happens with the seeds when they come out? Who puts seeds in their mouth? Only sunflower seeds, right? Do you eat sunflower seeds? Good. All plants make seeds, y'all, but pay attention real close. Don't eat every seed that you find on a plant. Always, always talk to your mom, your dad, your grandma, anybody before you put anything in your mouth from the yard. Sometimes they are edible, but be sure, just to be safe, only eat sunflower seeds. You can eat these straight from the plant. And a fascinating thing is you can eat them if you let them dry. What you do on the blooming plant is don't cut it off if you want it to go to seed. You leave it as ugly as it is, and it will be backside ugly for a while. But it's a great thing because the birds will come and land on it, and they'll start to break it apart. When you open up a seed head, and it starts to be where you can rub your fingers over and they fall out, that means they're ready. You can tap them out and get it all out. And you know what else you can do with that sunflower head? You can scrub your mom's potting bench. It's a scrubbing pad. I'm so serious. It is. And it's been used for that for hundreds of years in the country. Sunflowers became more popular, even though they're native to the Americas, which is one of the few native flowers that's gone worldwide, actually. They're native to South America and North America. They were discovered here by the Spanish settlers, and they were taken back over to Spain, and they were named Parasol. And anyone a doctor or know Latin in the house? Does anybody study Latin at this young age? But SOL is Latin for sun. So hero is turn or gear. What does a sunflower do? I'm going to see if I can imitate it. I'll be a group of sunflowers. No, it's okay. I can pull them all out. Okay, guys, this is what a sunflower does. It starts facing the east, and then all of a sudden it follows the sun. The plant doesn't, but the head does. It's fascinating. It actually has a mechanism to gear in, so that's called parasol, is sun turner, which translates literally. But what they discovered, the Russians thought it an exotic flower. And so they took it to Russia as early as the 1700s, and they grew it because the Russian Orthodox Church forbade the use of any oils during Lent, except for sunflower oil. They had no laws on them, so it became super popular. And I think within 50 years in the middle of Europe, there were probably thousands of acres. So many times you can fly over Europe if you fly over in the summer, and you will see either fields of sunflowers or you'll see something that's called rade, which is like a mustard plant that blooms yellow. So for that reason, they've become very popular and they return back to America even more popular. They're noted in art, they're noted in folk art, they're noted as being healing. You're supposed to be able, in Indian culture, American Indians would take the oil and use it like a Vicks Vapor Rub to put on your chest. Does anybody use Vicks Vapor Rub anymore? Yeah, there you go. Remember the vaporizer? But for you kids who don't know that, it would open up your eyes and your sinuses, but it would clear up your chest and it would calm you down. Think about all the foods that sunflowers produce food and oil for. You're going to taste some today that are like, wow. And to me, they're better than peanuts because they require less intensive fertilization. They have probably fewer disease and insect problems, and they're a more nutritious nut. They're a nut that has probably more protein per ounce than the peanut has more roughage. But not everybody likes goobers. Raise your hand if you like boiled peanuts. Where are you all from who don't? You Yankees, you just haven't had it cooked right. You cook it outside, otherwise, I'm just saying, it smells like a house. So my thought on gardening is that your generation, every one of you, and even the adults that I see in this room, are the generation that will turn the world differently. My generation, I am in my 60s, early 60s. I would say probably half of my contemporaries view global change as super important, and maybe about half. It gets higher and higher as the generations go down. My nieces and nephews, it's probably more like 75% are concerned. And I think in your generation, you will be concerned about changing the way you farm. And think about, in closing, plant smart plants. These are super smart plants. And to be honest with you, with what you plant today, you can plant it and survive it over the winter here. I've had them grow in my yard. They'll go down. They grew in Russia. The most famous Russian mammoth is 30 feet tall, believe it or not. That's probably twice as high as the ceiling. And I think the head on it is like that. Can you imagine the birds landing on that? That would be a party. But can you imagine all of the oil and the goodness that comes from that? But what a smart plant. And what you do with them is you turn them back into the soil, like you do peanuts, but you turn the sunflower roughage and parts and let it decompose, bless you, into the soil. And so it returns. It requires no insecticides. The reason that it's good that cotton, tobacco, and corn are leaving the landscapes of the Southeast is that they were super intensive with fertilization, with insecticides, with toll on workers harvesting it, really tough. The emerging crops in the Southeast, when I drive up to Broxton and take a look around, are organic blueberries, because what they're doing is there's plenty of poorly drained soil in Southeast Georgia, I promise you. And it's blueberries love that. That's their native habitat. They're related to the native azaleas. So they like poor sandy coastal soils that can sometimes stay wet. And they love open light, and they require no sprays, no fertilizers. You leave them alone. And so I see crop after crop. I don't see corn anymore. It's the most water intensive. It's like growing St. Augustine sod on 1,000 acres. So for you guys who have St. Augustine and you know what it's like to keep it alive, have less of it. I promise you, you'll be happier. Find a way to balance removing challenges. Take 30% of your sod that drinks precious water and turn it into pine straw. or sunflowers, basically. You could colonize a sunflower group that would reseed itself, that you could manage to establish almost like a sunflower swale. What's the one flower that grows without any care under a bird feeder? Yes, ma'am. Everything else that we eat turns into wood and grass and plants that we can't eat. We could, I guess you could make a salad out of millet, you know? But just saying, when you find that, then you know it's a good thing. And you'll find sunflowers that will germinate underneath, and you can transplant them and move them. I never pull out sunflowers. I think they're signs of good luck. So in gardening, these were some things my great aunt Bess told me that her dad, my great grandfather, the farmer, would say. And one of them's a little off color and a little bit more adult, but I'll say it anyway at the very end. She said that he would say, it's mind over matter. If you don't mind, it really don't matter. And that we're going to make chicken salad out of chicken scratch. So that was taking lemonade from lemons. And he also said, don't just do that at sea level, meaning what you can't see doesn't matter. You know, he said, he would tell her, do that beyond sea level, as she thought. And he said, don't fix what you just can't see. And then the best was, his joke was this, and my grandmother told me this. What is the difference between a big fat watermelon and a sweet pea? Yes? Usually about 5 minutes. Or in my case, maybe 3. For the adults in the class who can understand that. So anyway, I hope I didn't leave on too off color a note. So I'll explain that to you all if you didn't understand. When you eat watermelon, it goes right through you. Sit down and eat an entire watermelon and you will need to go to the bathroom. That's what the joke's about. So the difference between that's about 5 minutes is what the joke was, that you got to find a way to relieve yourself. And in my joke case, it takes about 3. Well, that's okay. Yes, please. I didn't mean to get too silly. Please, questions. I need to redeem myself. Yes, ma'am. Because it faces and follows literally the sun, and characteristically, it's built like a sun. When you look at it, it looks like sun rays. So culturally, it became sunflower or flower of the sun, probably in Europe. I don't know what the other names were other than Spanish and Italian, which are based on Latin, is aerosol or sun. So.
Put in the back?
Yes, yes, sir.
Here. Why is it?
Get to the sun, literally, because what happens with it, it outgrows, but in a nice way. It's a good plant. You should all be more like good plants, because I'll tell you why. A sunflower grows tall. It doesn't grow out and crowd the neighbors. It goes to the sun. It does its work, minds its business, and doesn't intrude on anyone else. And it's still strong. It stands up. It gets up higher so that if it's safe, it's grown in a field of grass or a field of wheat. It can outgrow its surroundings, but not overshadow them. So it's a great plant in a garden to couple up with things.
Well,
Yeah. Yes. Is it yellow? Big yellow flower? There are so many helianthus, and in the family, it's Solanaceae family, but there are thousands of different varieties. There are dwarf of these. Tell me when the time gets close, there are dwarf varieties of these that you wouldn't even recognize. They're only that big. There's a beach dune sunflower that you might see growing like out in Ponte Vedra and landscapings that has a tiny little yellow flower that's in the same family, but it grows, creeps on the ground like a ground cover. Yes, sir. That?
Why do you think sunflower is good love?
I think they're God's flower. I think if you think about all the flowers that can come up, what's the one flower that takes care of more things? So, yeah, think about all this. It makes you happy, you know, if somebody gave you a sunflower, you would smile, right? Did y'all ever? There were more questions, and then I wanted to show you a trick that my grandmother showed me. Any more questions? Did y'all ever do the butter trick? Do you like butter? You would go, who's done the butter trick? Well, it's easy, everybody likes butter, but what you do is you would go and say, do you like butter? I don't know, is my underside yellow? Does it make my skin yellow? It would, and it reflect, if you're outside in the sun, my aunt would come up and say, do you like butter? And she would hold the dandelion right there, and it would reflect up, and she was always right. Who doesn't like butter? Okay, there we go. Yeah, oh, I thought you had another question. That's okay, that's okay, that is not always good for you, so. Running a performer is not always good for the figure. Hey, were there any other, y'all have fun, I have an elderly dog, so I'm gonna go home and tend to him. But I see some friends I wanted to talk to too before everybody leaves. Y'all enjoy, you're in good hands and enjoy. Thank you. Oh, and he killed me. When he had to go to town, he would have to put on, he'd probably have to get himself dressed up. And then these weren't his glasses, but he wore glasses like this. And so that said, he would have to go and probably pay his bill at the feed and seed. And he was a tenant farmer. My grandfather wasn't, but my great granddad would. And the only thing he had to buy for his family were shoes, because my grandmother could make, my great grandmother. So he would probably go to town in the 20s or 30s to pay a bill and pick up supplies. And they had to buy sugar, they could make syrup, and they could make all their dairy products. And they had fabric, but they couldn't do shoes. So they had to go to the general store in Roxton and pay for shoes. And then they went to the pharmacy there. So it was not an easy life. And I'll say this, I did not ever know my great granddad or my granddad because he passed away. But my great grandmother and my Aunt Bess and my grandmother I did. And the hard life took a toll on my great grandmother. By the time she was only 70 or 75, she looked 20 years older and was tired, you know. So that said, it's a tolling life, but it's worth it. You guys just cover up, cover the sun, but garden, please. We're going to save the world. Amen. Thank you, guys. Hey, if anybody would like to share this, I'm going to donate.